I had to eat a big fat dessert of humble pie. Driven Mofos, welcome back to another episode of The Underestimated Entrepreneur. Well, that's right. I had to eat a big fat serving of humble pie. Sort of, but maybe not really. Yeah, I did. So a couple of weeks ago, I was out with a friend of mine who has built a very successful company in the sales training area. Now, this guy is in his 20s and he has about 150 staff working for him in a sales organization. And he built this business from scratch. Anyway, we're talking about hiring staff and onboarding different staff. And he said to me, because I asked him, I said, how do you hire so many people and how do you get it so right? And he gave me some absolutely brilliant advice. He said, number one, the first thing that we hire for is culture. And the most important thing is culture over anything else. Which is brilliant because I've been teaching this for years. I've been teaching that you have to create your culture guide before you create your key strategic plan. Now, a lot of the time, business owners will create a business plan or a business model, or they'll go to their accountant and they start working on finances and all these other key things, maybe sales and whatever. But if you don't have your culture right, it is very hard to grow the company off of that because you'll hire the wrong staff, ineffective staff, you'll put the wrong people in the wrong positions, and shit will keep falling apart and you'll just keep putting out fires as a business owner. That's why the first thing that I do at Business Growth Odyssey is when I do your onboarding, we create your culture or your company guide. Really, essentially, it's a culture guide. And then the company guide goes off of that, which then has mission, vision, values of the organization, and then key strategic pillars, which then you can grow the rest of the company off of. If you don't have those right, it's very challenging. Sometimes you can do it without it, just by using sheer force and grunt, which very few businesses do well over a long period of time. But eventually they'll hire someone who comes into the organization, who goes back and does all of those key principles. But anyway, he said, look, I drive culture more than anything. So he said, we focus more on culture over KPIs. So instead of having key performance indicators, which are you doing your job well? The question is, are you living your life well? And what he said is we get a lot of young guys who come in and they'll be drinking, they'll be going out on weekends. And then after working for us for 6 months, they stop going out, they stop partying, they stop drinking because they are so enthusiastic about doing their job that they don't want to wreck their Monday to Friday, because Monday to Friday, they're super effective. They wake up early, they go to the gym, they train, they feel better about themselves, their relationships improve, their working environment is great. So now they have this life that they enjoy. They don't have to go out and destroy it all on a weekend. Now I thought, that's really interesting because I don't really come across a lot of business owners who talk so heavily about culture and that being more important than KPIs. And he said to me, if they're normally not doing well in their role in their sales department or in their roles as management leadership, there's normally something else that's going on that's affecting them personally. And so then we have a talk about their personal life and try to find out what's going on so that then we can help them through that so they can keep going and doing a good job at work. So I thought that was very interesting. But I said, how do you hire such great people? And he said, I do a DISC profile. And I went, okay. Now, if you've heard from some of my podcasts before, I tend to shit on personality profiles and persona profiles. And the reason why I say that is because most people aren't self-aware enough to put truthful answers, so therefore they're inaccurate. And it's also about how you drive those people and how you get the results. So values testing is way more important. Anyway, he said something really surprising to me. He said, if you have a look on the DISC profile, Ds, which are more of the dominant, driven, driving force of, they're very driven people. And Is, which are more influential, they normally make really good salespeople. And what he said is we look for them because they are the great salespeople. If you start going down into the S and the C, Cs are more certainty driven. S's are more safety driven and structured, just from a general overview. And so he said they make really good systems and process managers, but they're not so good at just getting in there and driving sales and thinking in the big picture. And what he said to me was, when I get in my boardroom and I have a whole bunch of Ds and Is around me, he said, what will happen is that I will say to them, we want to go and launch a new business in London. And everyone's like, yeah, let's go do it. They don't have a game plan. They don't need to think everything through. They don't need all the details. They just start and they get shit done. And he said, so they're really good at moving a business forward fast. But then he said what happened was my business started falling apart because we didn't have the systems and the processes when we started bringing on people, to the number of about 30 to 40 staff. So when we started to get to that level, we needed more people to come in who had structure and process. He said, then I hired the S and the Cs. which are the more structured people and the more certainty driven people. And he said, then what happened was I had to train them that their role was to make the D's and the I's more effective. If they slow down the D's and the I's, so the driven people in the team, the big visionary type people, if they slowed them down, then sales would drop, cash flow would drop, and company growth would slow down. And I thought, shit, this is a really interesting way of using that profiling. Now, I know that a lot of businesses do DISC profiling. Now, values, I still believe, are the most important test that you can do. But I hadn't realized, and this was my mistake, because the way that I'd been trained to read DISC profiles and Myers-Briggs and stuff like that was that you were essentially not hiring people, but you were getting people to do these certain tests. If they weren't clear on who they were, what they liked, what they didn't like, they would put down ineffective and incorrect answers. And then when you hire the wrong person, they might think that they're a certain way, but they're not. Now, we've all had people in our business or people that we've worked with who think that they act and behave a certain way when they act and behave the complete opposite. That's because they lack self-awareness. So a lot of the time, if people are doing personality profiling or they're doing persona testing, those two things can be inaccurate because that person lacks self-awareness. That's my criticism of it. But when my friend went through this and was explaining this to me, I went, shit, that is actually a really great way of using a DISC profile. So I guess now I had to eat humble pie. And so I actually went back and I studied a lot more about DISC profiling with that understanding. And I went, I now understand how this works a bit more effectively. And so I had to eat a little bit of humble pie around that. And then the other crazy thing was I went back home and I thought, I'm going to have a look at my Myers-Briggs test. Now, this is another type of personality testing. And when I went back, I had a look at it and it was okay. But then I really read through it. And so I bought the paid version, which was like 20 or 30 bucks. If you want me to send you some of these tests, hit me up on Instagram and just say, can you send me the links for the personality tests that you use? And what I'll do is I'll send them to you and then you can use them and do your own tests. But the one that I use comes with like, if you pay like 20 bucks or something, you get like a couple 100-page report. And it was wild. I wouldn't necessarily use the Myers-Briggs to hire people in most cases. But what I would do is I would use it as an amazing way of understanding yourself better. And so just in the last couple of weeks, I've sent that to a bunch of business owners that I know who sometimes struggle with understanding their own strengths and sometimes appreciating their own skills, where they beat themselves up a lot. They start feeling shit about themselves. They think that they should be doing more or achieving more or doing something greater. And once I've sent it to them, they sent me a message back and went, shit, this is an eye-opener. And so I would use the Myers-Briggs test based on what I currently know to get really clear about who you are as a person and how you perform at your best. Now, again, this comes back to you being self-aware, because if you do the test wrong, then it's not really accurate. But when I did mine, I read back through it and I went right through the whole profile. I went, shit, this makes so much sense. And it makes so much sense as to the reasons why I act a certain way, why I behave a certain way, and why I think a certain way. And what it showed me was more of my position and how I can utilize my skill sets in both business and also my personal life and also in coaching. I also sent it to Jess and said, can you go and go and do yours as well? And then let's look at them both together. And we were a perfect match as two different types of personalities that work really well together. So no wonder why we work well together and have been together for 15 years, because those personality profiles work well together. So what I realized over the last couple of weeks and after talking to my friend is DISC profiling is actually probably really good as a hiring strategy if you know what you're doing with the profiling system. And so for the business owners out there, it might be something to utilize in your hiring process. But also you need to make sure you do values testing. Values testing is 100%, it's the biggest foundation. Because if people live outside of their values, they are going to self-sabotage and self-destruct eventually. So values first, and then go and do your DISC profile second. Once you do your DISC profile, it'll give you a better understanding of how they operate and where you can fit them into your business. But I think that it's also important to learn from other business owners about how they effectively use their DISC profiling. Because if it wasn't for him explaining that Ds that are extremely driven and Is that are influential make great salespeople, and they'll push hard, they will be driven, they'll be ambitious, but they can be slowed down by having too many systemized and structured people in the organization. Now, there's a lot of you out there who send me messages and say, I've got this small business, I need to put in more systems and processes because some motherfucker has told me that I have to work on my business, not in my business, which is completely false and completely incorrect. If your goal is to grow the business financially, you need those D's and the I's to drive hard, to make sales, to do delivery, and to execute. The S and the C's, which are more your structured and certainty-driven people, they're going to be great for doing the same thing over and over and over again. So if a C has a great structure and a great process, they'll just repeat the same thing over and over and over again, and they'll just do their job really, really well. The S's, from what he explained to me and from what I've gone and learned about, is that the S's are more your structured type personalities. Now, if you bring a structured person into a business with just 2 to 3 D's and I's, they can slow down by putting in more process and more systems. Now, I realize this now that my old general manager that I had, she was a heavy, heavy SC. And so when I hired her, she was more worried about writing policies. Like the first policy that she wrote was a racism policy. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing wasting all this time and energy creating a racism policy? There's myself, there's Jess, and there's one other person. There's one other person in the company. And then we've got 3 people who are offshore in the Philippines. So there's 6 of us. Why would we do a racism policy? Like we have 3 Filipinos and then we have 3 Australians. Like what could possibly upset us? All right. Because all of us get along really, really well. And she's like, yeah, but you need to have one. Yeah, you might need to when you've got 50 staff, but that's not day one, step one of putting together systems and processes or structure in a business. And so all of the stuff that she was building in the systemization of the company actually slowed everything down. It slowed down sales. It slowed down marketing. It made everything 10 times harder. But she thought she was doing a great job because she needed the structure and the certainty. She wanted to make sure that if something was done, it was done so perfectly well that it would never break. But the problem was that it's a fast-growing business. Things break all the time. Things are changing. You've got to be adaptable. And so that really caused a lot of problems. So I put the wrong person in the wrong role. That was my fault. If I'd done a disc profile, I knew what I was doing, I never would have hired her. I would have just hired more D's and I's, and we would have just gone hard and grown a lot bigger, a lot faster. So anyway, just to clarify, values testing is 100% essential, and you need to know what you're doing. I'm one of the best people in the world with values testing and creating values for organization and culture change. So that's something that's really important because that's the foundation of growth of your company. Then after that, disc profiling, from my understanding now, is you want to use that when you're hiring staff because it will give you a good understanding about their behaviors. But you need to think about what type of personality that you want in that role. Because if you've got someone in sales who is an S and a C, they're going to want systems, structures, processes. Everything's going to be super slow in most cases. If you've got a large sales organization with a lot of structure, a lot of process, a lot of admin, and they just have to follow a script, they're probably perfect. But not so much for a small business that just wants to grow and make sales and you just have to sort of partially wing it. So you've got to put the right person in the right place. And then finally, if you want to do the Myers-Briggs test, it gives you a great insight into you personally so that you can perceive your own value and your own greatness in your own life. Again, I had to eat a little bit of humble pie around shitting on personality profiles. Part of it, I still back myself in that they're only as accurate as the individual's self-awareness. If the person has no self-awareness and they're a complete douche, they're going to answer it incorrectly, which then means the profile is incorrect. And I've worked with plenty of people, and this is the reason why I shit on them, because I've seen a lot of business owners in the past hire people that have done the personality profile tests. It looks very, very accurate based on the answers that they've given, but the answers that they were given were bullshit because they just didn't know what they were doing or didn't have the self-awareness. So anyway, Driven Mofos, I hope that helps some of you out there with businesses, or if you're leading a team or you're managing people, or even if you want to grow just in your own self-awareness around your own skill sets. Those profiles may help. But again, values are the priority. They always come first because they drive all human behavior, your values. And make sure your values aren't things like kindness, happiness, love, respect, honor. I saw someone the other day who was a coach, and online they put that their highest number one value was loyalty. And I thought, this person has never studied values. And they did this whole thing about how they're a loyal person and how they got shat on because they had people around them who they were loyal to, but that loyalty didn't come back. That's not values. They're social idealisms. They're not values. But most people get taught that they're values, which is why they're confused. If you understand values at a high level, which you will learn coming to my Business Odyssey or my Thrive Time event, or any of my events, I pretty much go through values in most of my events. You will understand what really drives people and how to get the best out of people around you, whether it's friends, family, people in your business. And then once you do that, if you're running a business, then go and do a DISC profile. Make sure you read up about it. Do your own first, understand yourself, then go and read how other people operate. It'll help you to hire more effectively based on what I know now. And then finally, if you want to know more about yourself, go and do Myers-Briggs. Okay, I think that's quite a good test for self-awareness just for yourself. But from what I've seen, I wouldn't really use that to hire people. There's a bit of controversy around the Myers-Briggs testing. But look, I found it was a good insight to myself anyway. So did Jess and so have the clients that I've given it to. But anyway, if you need those tests, hit me up on Instagram. Just shoot me a message and just say you listen to the podcast and that you want the links to the tests. I'll flip them across to you. There should always be a free version and then you pay for the full 100-page report or whatever it is. But I hope that helps. Anyway, Driven Mofos, have a great day. Keep kicking ass. And I look forward to you joining me back here once again for another episode of The Underestimated Entrepreneur. Most people waste their life and I just don't want you to be one of them.